To the outside world, I am a woman who has everything figured out. At 31, I am the founder and CEO of Meridian Properties, a real estate development firm I built from a single rental unit and $12,000 in savings I'd scraped together working double shifts through college. Our portfolio now spans 4 states. We have offices in Chicago, Dallas, and a new flagship location on the 42nd floor of a glass tower in Midtown Manhattan. Last spring, Forbes ran a piece on me. The headline called me "The Quiet Force Reshaping American Real Estate." My mother cried when she read it. She printed 3 copies and keeps one on her refrigerator to this day. I tell you all of this not to impress you. I tell you because I need you to understand exactly how far I had come and exactly how much I had trusted the one person who was supposed to be standing beside me through all of it. His name is my husband. He was the CFO of Meridian Properties. I gave him that position 2 years into our marriage after he'd spent months telling me he believed in my vision, that he wanted to be part of building something real. He had an MBA from Northwestern. He had charm that could fill a room. He had a smile that made me believe for the first time in my adult life that I didn't have to carry everything alone. I was wrong, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the morning everything came apart. The morning of the Harlow Tower press conference. Harlow Tower was the biggest project of my career, a mixed-use development on the west side of Chicago, 40 floors, luxury residences on the upper half, retail and co-working space below, and a rooftop garden that our architect had spent 8 months designing. We'd been working on this deal for 3 years. 3 years of zoning battles, investor meetings, sleepless nights, and more spreadsheets than I could count. The press conference was the official public announcement before groundbreaking. We had 52 journalists confirmed, 3 local news crews, a dozen of our largest investors, and the mayor's deputy director attending in person. I had been awake since 4 in the morning. By 7, I was at the office reviewing talking points with my communications director. By 8:30, I was dressed a structured ivory blazer, tailored navy trousers, my grandmother's pearl earrings, standing in front of the mirror in my private bathroom and telling myself, "You built this. Today is yours." The text message came in at exactly 7:45 that morning. "Running a little late. See you there." I glanced at it while walking through the revolving doors of our Chicago headquarters and barely gave it a second thought. Daniel was late to almost everything lately. Meetings, dinners, charity events, even vacations. Somewhere along the line, I had stopped expecting punctuality from him the same way people stop expecting winters to feel short in Chicago. It became part of the climate of our marriage. The atrium on the ground floor had been transformed overnight into something that looked more like a luxury launch event than a corporate press conference. Floor-to-ceiling windows stretched toward the river, reflecting the pale gray morning light across polished stone floors. White orchids sat in sculptural arrangements beside display boards, showing renderings of Harlow Tower, the largest development project my company had ever secured. Rows of black chairs were already filling with journalists, investors, city officials, and executives. Camera crews adjusted tripods along the perimeter, while assistants hurried around with clipboards and earpieces. My assistant, Priya, intercepted me near the entrance with a coffee in one hand and a tablet in the other. "You're ahead of schedule for once," she said. "Mark the date." She smiled. "Everything's ready. You just need to breathe." That was Priya's talent. Everyone thinks executive assistants organize calendars, but the truly exceptional ones manage emotional weather systems. She could tell when I was anxious before I admitted it to myself. I took the coffee and walked toward the presentation boards, where 2 investors were waiting for me. We discussed timelines, zoning approvals, projected occupancy numbers. I was halfway through explaining our riverfront sustainability plan when movement near the side entrance caught my attention. A woman had entered through the staff access door. That door required a company key card, which meant someone had either let her in or she had access she absolutely should not have had. She looked young, 24, maybe 25. She wore a fitted cream-colored dress that was trying too hard for 9 in the morning. Her makeup was meticulous in the way makeup often is when someone expects to be looked at. In one hand was a coffee cup from the cafe across the street. She wasn't nervous. That was what stood out to me. People entering unfamiliar executive spaces usually hesitate. They look around, check signs, search for reassurance. She moved like someone arriving for a reservation already made in her name. I didn't recognize her. I turned back to the investors. 10 seconds later, everything changed. I heard Priya's voice first. "Excuse me, you can't be back here." Then heat splashed across my left shoulder and arm. The smell hit immediately. Espresso, burnt caramel, milk. I looked down and watched dark liquid spread rapidly across my ivory blazer, soaking through the fabric and into the silk blouse beneath it. The coffee dripped from my sleeve onto the marble floor. The entire atrium went silent. Not quieter, silent. 50 journalists, investors, staff, city representatives, camera operators, all watching. I turned slowly. The woman stood a few feet away, holding the empty cup. Her expression held no embarrassment whatsoever, no shock, no apology, only satisfaction. "Oops," she said, and then she smiled. A camera shutter clicked somewhere behind me, then another. I have spent most of my adult life in rooms where people expected me to fail. I had investors explain my own business model back to me in slower voices because I was a woman under 40. I had contractors ignore direct instructions until a male executive repeated them. I had walked into boardrooms where men twice my age assumed I was someone's assistant. I learned years ago that composure is not personality. It is strategy. So when I stood there with coffee dripping from my blazer in front of an audience large enough to destroy a reputation in under 5 minutes, I did not yell. I looked directly at her. "I'm going to need you to explain what just happened." She tilted her head lazily. "I don't think I owe you an explanation. You just poured coffee on me at my own press conference," I replied evenly. "In my own building. So yes, you do." She took a single step closer. "Your building?" She laughed softly. "Honey, my husband is the CFO of this company, which means half of everything in this room belongs to me too." A few people nearby shifted uncomfortably. She looked me up and down slowly. "Including whatever that is you're wearing." Another camera click. The silence afterward had weight to it. You could feel people trying not to react. I looked at her for a very long moment. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I typed 3 sentences. "I need you at the office immediately. Your girlfriend just introduced herself to me and 50 journalists. You may want to get here before I start answering questions." I sent it. Then I handed my phone to Priya. "Give me 8 minutes," I said calmly to the room, and I walked away. My office was on the mezzanine level overlooking the atrium. The moment the door shut behind me, the noise from outside dulled into a low hum. I peeled off the stained blazer and dropped it across a chair. Coffee had soaked through the lining completely. My blouse was ruined too. For exactly 3 seconds, I allowed myself to stand still, not to cry, not to panic, just to feel the shock land. Then I opened the wardrobe cabinet behind my desk and pulled out the charcoal gray blazer I kept there for emergencies. Every woman in leadership learns eventually to keep an emergency blazer nearby. Sometimes the emergencies are coffee stains, sometimes they're blood. I changed quickly, pinned my grandmother's pearl brooch back onto the lapel, and looked at myself in the mirror. I looked composed. More importantly, I looked untouched. That mattered, because the world often confuses visible pain with weakness. I walked back into the atrium exactly 7 minutes later. Conversation stopped as people noticed me returning. I stepped behind the podium. "Good morning," I said, with a smile smooth enough to make several people visibly uncertain whether they had imagined the previous scene. Then I delivered the best presentation of my life. Not because I felt inspired, because survival sharpens people. Every statistic landed perfectly. Every transition flowed naturally. I answered questions before they were asked. I spoke about economic growth, housing impact, infrastructure revitalization, job creation. Investors nodded. Journalists took notes rapidly. Halfway through the presentation, the rear doors opened. Daniel walked in. Even from across the room, I recognized the expression immediately. Fear, not confusion, not concern. Fear. He scanned the room frantically until he found her standing near the side wall. The color drained from his face, and in that instant, before a single word was exchanged, I knew everything. Maybe not details, but enough. He moved toward her quickly. She touched his arm possessively. His posture stiffened, like a man already bracing for impact. I continued speaking without missing a sentence. That part mattered to me later, the fact that I kept going. When the presentation ended, applause filled the atrium. People rose from their seats. Conversations restarted. Cameras flashed. I stepped away from the podium and walked directly toward them. Daniel looked physically ill. She looked triumphant. "I think," I said quietly to him, "the 3 of us should step into the conference room." He opened his mouth. "Now," I said, "please." The conference room walls were glass, facing directly into the atrium. Anyone outside could see us moving, sitting, standing. They just couldn't hear. I stayed standing at the head of the table. Neither of them spoke. "How long?" I asked. Daniel stared downward. The silence answered before he did. 14 months, she said. His eyes snapped toward her. She sat down casually, crossing one leg over the other, like she was settling into brunch. "We've been together 14 months, she continued, "and I'm 11 weeks pregnant." For 1 second, everything inside me stopped moving. I looked at Daniel. "Is that true?" He nodded once. There are moments when human beings expect devastation to feel explosive. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes betrayal arrives like ice. Everything slows. Everything clarifies. I became intensely calm. "Okay," I said. She frowned slightly. "That's all? What response were you expecting?" "I don't know," she snapped. "Something. I wasn't speaking to you. I didn't raise my voice, didn't insult her, didn't perform outrage. I simply looked back at Daniel. I need you to go home, he blinked. My attorney will contact you before the end of the business day. Do not access company accounts. Do not send emails from your executive address. Do not contact my staff, and do not remove anything from the house. His face tightened. Victoria, that last instruction, I interrupted, is for your protection as much as mine. He stood there frozen for several seconds, looking like he wanted to explain himself, but guilt rarely produces coherent language. Eventually he left. She remained seated. You're really not going to fight for him? I finally looked at her properly then. Underneath the confidence was panic. You could see it in her hands, in the tension in her jaw, in the way she kept straightening her posture every few seconds, like someone trying to convince herself she had won something. I wondered what lies Daniel had fed her. Maybe he told her we were separated. Maybe he painted me as cold, ambitious, neglectful. Men having affairs often create fictional wives to justify their behavior. No, I said quietly. I'm not. Why not? Because I built this company, I replied. And I'll still be here after today is over. I let the silence settle. That may not be true for everyone involved. Then I walked out. The next 11 days dismantled the remaining illusion of my marriage piece by piece. My attorney, Marianne, arrived at the office within hours of the confrontation. She had represented Meridian Development for 6 years and possessed the emotional warmth of a surgical instrument, which was exactly what I needed. By that evening, she had already frozen several internal permissions connected to Daniel's executive access. 48 hours later, she called me into her office. There were spreadsheets spread across the table, bank transfers, account summaries, transaction chains. At first glance, the numbers looked ordinary: operating expenses, vendor reallocations, routine movement. Then Marianne showed me the patterns. Daniel had been siphoning money from company accounts for nearly a year, carefully, methodically, amounts small enough individually to avoid triggering automated scrutiny, routed through layered transactions, before landing in a private account opened under an LLC I had never heard of. The final total sat highlighted at the bottom of the page: $437,000. I stared at the number for a long time, not because of the money itself. Meridian was successful enough to survive the financial loss, but because theft changes the meaning of memory. Every late meeting, every unexplained absence, every distracted dinner, every business trip. Suddenly, the past rearranges itself into something uglier. Part of the money paid for an apartment 2 miles from our home. Part paid for a luxury vehicle registered under her name. The rest remained untouched in the account like unfinished plans. I remember sitting alone in my office after Marianne left, staring at the skyline through the windows. People think intelligence protects you from betrayal. It doesn't. Love is not stupidity. Love is granting someone access to the unprotected parts of your life because you believe they will treat them carefully. That trust is not foolish. The violation of it is. The divorce petition and civil fraud complaint were filed the same day. Marianne also forwarded the financial evidence to the district attorney's office. A criminal investigation opened shortly afterward. Daniel called me twice. I never answered. Then, 4 days later, another number appeared on my phone. I almost ignored it. Something made me pick up. I didn't know about the money. Her voice sounded different now, smaller. The arrogance from the conference room had vanished completely. I swear to you, she said quickly, I didn't know he was stealing from the company. I believed her immediately. Not because I trusted her, because people involved in deception often reveal themselves through the wrong emotions. She sounded ashamed, not defensive. Are you keeping the baby? I asked. A long pause followed. Yes. I leaned back in my chair. Then you need to have your attorney file for paternity and support immediately before his accounts are frozen. Silence. Then quietly, why are you helping me? I'm helping the child, I said. Those are different things. I ended the call. After that, I stopped discussing her entirely. There was no point. Anger is expensive. I had more valuable things to spend energy on, so I worked. Harlow Tower moved forward despite the scandal swirling around the company. If anything, public interest intensified. The story leaked eventually, though not all the details. Chicago business media thrives on humiliation dressed as journalism. Articles appeared, rumors spread, speculation multiplied. But the project survived because I survived. That distinction matters. Groundbreaking was rescheduled 6 weeks later. Attendance doubled. The mayor attended personally this time instead of sending a representative. One journalist who had witnessed the coffee incident wrote a feature about me for the Tribune. The headline read, "After the storm, how Victoria Lane kept building." My mother framed the article. She cried while telling me about it over the phone. "I always knew you were strong," she said. "No," I answered softly. "You knew I was stubborn. That too." The divorce finalized 4 months after filing. Daniel's criminal investigation continued beyond that. Apparently, the financial misconduct extended into activities predating our marriage. Federal investigators became involved eventually. I stopped following updates. Priya filtered his name from my news alerts. Some endings deserve distance. There is one more person in this story. His name is Daniel Mercer, not my ex-husband. The attorney. He had served as outside counsel for Meridian almost since the beginning. Quiet, precise, never dramatic. The kind of man who spoke only when he had something worth saying. He had been present the morning of the press conference. After everything happened, after the confrontation and the presentation and the endless questions from staff and reporters, he found me alone near the elevator bank. He handed me a glass of water. "You were extraordinary up there," he said. Nothing else. No interrogation, no sympathy performance, no unsolicited advice, just recognition. Then he stood beside me quietly while I drank the water. Strange how certain moments stay with you, not the loud ones, the gentle ones, especially after chaos. For months after the divorce, our relationship remained entirely professional. Calls, meetings, legal reviews, contracts. Then one evening he texted me, "Thai food?" That was it. No emotional speech, no elaborate setup. I stared at the message for almost a full minute before replying, "Yes." Dinner lasted 2.5 hours. We talked about music, architecture, childhood memories, travel, books neither of us had finished reading. We avoided discussing the divorce entirely. When he walked me to my car, he paused. "Can I see you again?" "Yes," I said. Again. Simple answers became important to me after years of complicated lies. 7 months later, we sat together on my balcony overlooking the Chicago skyline. The river reflected gold from the city lights below. Traffic moved slowly across the bridges, like streams of red and white ribbon. We had been talking about absolutely nothing important when he reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small velvet box on the table between us. He didn't slide it toward me dramatically, didn't kneel, didn't start performing romance like a man auditioning for approval. He simply placed it there, then waited. I looked at the box, then at him. "You're not going to say anything?" "I assumed you'd prefer to review the evidence first before forming conclusions." I laughed immediately. Not polite laughter, real laughter, unexpected and unguarded, the kind that escapes before you remember to control it. I opened the box. Inside sat a ring so perfectly understated it almost hurt me. One clean stone, elegant, thoughtful, no excess, no spectacle. A ring selected by someone who actually understood me instead of someone trying to impress strangers. I looked back at him. There was no pressure in his face, only patience. "Yes," I said, and I meant it without hesitation, because here is what nobody tells you after betrayal. Healing is not becoming incapable of trust. Healing is learning to recognize the difference between attention and care. One is loud, the other is consistent. My ex-husband had spent years performing devotion while quietly dismantling the foundation beneath us. Daniel never performed anything. When things became difficult, he showed up, calmly, repeatedly, without requiring applause for it. That matters more than charm ever will. People often assume stories like mine are about revenge. They aren't. Revenge would have required me to remain emotionally attached to destruction. What happened instead was reconstruction. Different thing entirely. Harlow Tower breaks ground in the spring. 3 additional projects are already in development behind it. My company survived. More than survived, actually. It grew. Sometimes I think about the woman who walked into that atrium carrying coffee like a weapon. She believed she was detonating someone else's life. What she actually did was expose damage already hidden beneath the surface. The marriage was already collapsing. The lies already existed. The theft already existed. The betrayal already existed. She simply forced the truth into daylight sooner than planned. For a long time, I hated her for the humiliation. Now I mostly feel distant from the entire thing. Time changes emotional temperature. I'm standing on a balcony overlooking Chicago, with a future I chose intentionally. Across the river, steel is rising from the ground on a building carrying my name through city permits and construction filings and investment contracts. I built that. Not my ex-husband. Not the people who underestimated me. Not the woman with the coffee cup. Me. And beside me is a man who understands that love is not possession, performance, or control. Sometimes it is simply handing someone a glass of water on the worst morning of their life and reminding them they are still themselves underneath the wreckage. That is enough, more than enough.